People who speak a second language. What have you overheard people saying about you when they thought you couldn't understand? I witnessed some serious crap go down. A black family was eating dinner in a restaurant. They kept looking 2 tables over at a Spanish table. The black mom looked more and more mad. Finally she walked over, got down on one knee and in a stern yet not loud voice, started going off a mile a minute in perfect Spanish. She didn't stop for a solid minute. The look on the Spanish family's face was of absolutely shock and horror. Afterwards, nothing was said, and she went back to her table with a slight grin. Come to find out she was a college professor who taught Spanish, and the Spanish family kept making racist comments about their black sever, as well as the black family in question. Rules for living in Florida. 1. Never assume someone can speak Spanish. 2. Never assume someone can't speak Spanish. One evening, I called an Uber driven by Abdel Latif. Mr. Abdel Latif, an Egyptian, was nice enough at the start, but then took a phone call from an Arabic-speaking friend of his and started complaining very colorfully about his day. He eventually finished his rant by stating that he would head home after he takes this one last bad Arabic slur in his car home. I, of course, didn't drop the ruse and pretended that my Uber driver didn't just loudly, and quite needlessly, insult me to this random person on the phone. When we finally arrived, he told me to have a nice evening, so I told him, the gist of which is, good night, a shat, and walked away, putting on my best display of being highly offended, even though I was dying from laughter on the inside after seeing the look on his face. Weeks later, I took another Uber, driven by Mr. Badri, an Iraqi. He seemed like he had a lot of trouble with English over the phone, so I started the ride off by greeting him in Arabic. He was quickly at ease, and was surprised that I spoke Arabic so fluently for a white American. I explained I was only half Egyptian and that was probably why I didn't look like your stereotypical Middle Easterner. He laughed, and said it reminded him of a story his Egyptian friend, also an Uber driver, told him about the time he picked up this white guy that turned out to speak perfect Arabic. I asked him his friend's name. It was Abdel Latif. Me and 2 other friends, one American, one German, were in rural town Philippines. We were getting out of a cab and unloading our bags when the cabbie's buddy pulls over next to us and they start chatting in the local language. Buddy, whoa, foreigners. How much did you get off them? Cabbie, usual 80 pesos. Buddy, no way, I would have charged them at least double. Me, I think 80 pesos is quite fair, don't you? His jaw dropped, and he awkwardly drove away. I learned enough to get by, but I deliberately keep it to myself, just for moments like these. It was really sweet actually. 2 teenage boys. Do you think that's a real eye color? I don't know. Ask her. Ask her what? If they're contacts. I don't know how to say contacts in English. Do you? No. Okay. I'm from American but I live in Japan, and my friend came to visit last year. While we were sitting at a counter at a sushi restaurant, this Japanese older couple came in and sat in the seats next to us. We were just looking at the menu and talking about what to order and I overheard the guy next to me talking to his wife saying, "Oh, I wonder if they're okay. They probably can't read the menu. Should we do something? Maybe we should help." It was actually kind of cute. I just turned to them and politely said that there was no need, but I appreciated the thought. My friend's dad speaks decent Japanese and was at work one day when 2 visiting Japanese businessmen entered the elevator he was in and started talking mad crap about how stupid Americans were. One of them said something along the lines of, "We have to learn English, and this stupid butthole," referring to my friend's dad, doesn't speak any Japanese. My friend's dad paused for a few seconds, then replied, "I speak a little enough to understand what you just said." Anyway, he told me the look of horror on their faces was absolutely priceless. I get to pull this one once a month, at least. My favorite was when they brought along an interpreter to the meeting and were saying very different things among each other than the negotiation stance they were relaying in English. So at one point I just switched to Japanese. I live in China and went to a remote city up on the North Korean border. Had just got back from Pyongyang, but that's irrelevant. Went into a little corner shop and the Chinese people in there froze. Then started talking about how rare it is to see foreigners come to the city but how none of them ever understand any Chinese. The little grandma who ran the shop tried to stop them talking about me, but they just said it doesn't matter, she has no idea anyway. Proceeded to chat with the cute grandma when I was paying, and got to listen to the dead silence as I left. Big up Chinese grandma. I've heard multiple merchants telling each other to charge me more. Sometimes they say the price in English, but when a local customer comes up they will say a lower price for the same item in the local language. Kind of reversal here. Ex-girlfriend, native Russian, and her sister were bad-mouthing a fat American for wearing pajama pants and slippers in the grocery store in Russian. As it turned out, their Russian radar was a bit off that day, because she turned around and replied back in pure Russian, the equivalent of "if you aren't paying for my clothes then shut your mouths." They did. I worked at a popular theme park in Florida at the International Restaurant area. Every day I would ride the bus and not hear a single English conversation. One day 2 French exchange workers sat on either side of me continuing their chat about their evening plans. I tried to ignore them but found myself ping-ponging my glance to whichever one was talking. They apparently caught this. Girl 1. Do you think he understands us? Girl 2. No, he is an American worker. You can tell this from uniforms. They are too stupid. Me. Yes, I am American but I'm not stupid. Silence. I'm an EMT. I am by no means fluent, but I speak enough Spanish to get by. A couple years ago I was transporting an elderly Latina woman to the ER and her 2 granddaughters came to keep her company. They had an entire discussion about how one of them should ask me out, how cute I was, etc, etc. When we got to the ER and we were registering their grandmother, I asked her to slide over into the hospital stretcher in Spanish. They both blushed and then hid until I left. My family is deaf, but my parents are the type that don't let their deafness slow them down. We were up for an upgrade for our phones through Sprint, and went in to get our new phones. Of course, my dad had done all the research with me, and we scoured the internet for as much information as possible. Phone upgrades are needlessly complicated these days. When we started talking to the Sprint rep, she had a trainee badge. She started telling us all about leasing a new phone versus owning one outright. It was, according to her speech, a great deal. If we were to go through with this, fees would increase our monthly payments by $100. So my father declined. They went back and forth on the notepad for a while, and I maintained my distance, occasionally telling my dad that leasing is BS and we should stick with what the upgrade used to mean. The poor trainee brought in her supervisor, and they continued to discuss terms. I try to interpret for my parents, but they generally don't let me. Needless to say, this whole process took much longer than it should have, and eventually there were 3 employees surrounding my dad, watching what he was writing, and discussing among themselves how to phrase things, and how to get him to just pay more. How does he know all this? Does one of our signs say that? I started to get a little frustrated with how they kept trying to get him to move from owning phones to leasing, and they started to get nasty with their comments. As there were no other guests in the store, I stopped him, signed there saying really, not nice stuff, and are clearly trying to cheat us. He thanked them for their time. We walked down the sidewalk, and switched to another provider that now has provided upgrades with no hassle. Oh, and I made sure to translate what he said, and their faces as we left almost made the whole thing worth it. I sign, but I'm not really skilled enough to speak English while I do it, so I don't. Plus there was no need to. I was the only hearing volunteer that night. Earlier this year I was a volunteer at a deaf event held in my town. It was at a pool hall that was just open to the public as well as the people playing in the deaf competition. I was actually shocked how often a hearing person would come in and say something rude and mean about us all signing away happily. Eventually I just got sick of it and told one group walking past I could still hear them and the looks on their faces were great to watch. My mother was visiting hers in Prague and walked to her car with German plates. Some idiots were standing next to her car. One said, "I can't wait to see how that stupid cow is going to get out of that parking spot." And my mother answered, "Well, if the stupid cow got her car in there, she's going to get it out of there too. Right? Zechmet." When I worked as a cashier, these 2 Russian men came through my line. I told them have a great day and one of the men said to the other, I wish I could take her with me. I immediately made eye contact with the guy and said number. He turned beet red and ran out of the store really fast. His friend ended up carrying all their stuff, laughing his butt off. I gotta admit it was pretty funny. Not really talking about me, but once I walked into the office of my high school to see the nurse because I was feeling sick. The secretary made me wait there while she was talking to her friend in Spanish over the phone about how she didn't know she was pregnant when she got drunk a week ago. So many Romanian people feel the need to insult me and my children. I, of course, insult them back, and then after some homemade liquor we're best friends. I'm a Macedonian speaker living in Michigan. I was at the mall and overheard two Macedonian women talking about a man buying a bunch of socks. What they said was something along the lines of, why is that crazy black man buying so many socks? The guy responded, in Macedonian, I'm buying these socks to send to my brothers in Macedonia. They got so freaking red in the face it was unbelievable. Two old Japanese ladies in a sauna were talking about their niece and how she was about to marry a stupid American and was making a huge mistake. Finally one of them said something like, there's other people in here, maybe we should talk about this later, to which the other responded, what, those two white girls? Yeah sure, like they would understand. My friend and I were only like 12 but were in a Japanese immersion program. When we left I said I hope you get the problems with your niece worked out. I used to live in Taiwan and for some reason the locals always like to discuss what country they think my group of friends are from. We had a wide variety of English speaking expats. They really couldn't seem to wrap their minds around the fact we weren't all Americans. But I also had the reverse experience. My friend and I were on the bus standing in front of a seated elderly grandpa reading a Chinese newspaper, and somehow my friend and I ended up talking very explicitly about our sexual history and background. Very graphic with personal preferences and that sort of thing. We weren't too loud, but we were definitely talking detailed descriptions and experiences in earnest for the majority of the 20-minute bus ride. My friend gets off the bus and waves bye to me as I live a few stops after her. The second the bus starts moving again, the grandpa put down his newspaper and says in perfect English, so, you two are both Americans? I was dying as I had to make polite small talk for the next 10 minutes with an elderly grandpa who clearly understood every single word coming out of our mouths. I speak fairly fluent Spanish and work as a lifeguard in England. While I was cleaning one of the changing rooms, a bunch of Spanish guys got out of the pool and started getting changed. And one of them watched me saying something along the lines of, wow, this guy has no idea how to do his job. I walked near them and asked everything alright, gentleman shortly afterwards, and he swiftly shut up. Most satisfying exchange ever. My girlfriend worked in Japan for 3 years after college and is still fluent 25 years later. We were once together in a Japanese food store in town and two young men, maybe 16 or 17, said a couple of things back and forth in our aisle, and she turned and said something rapid fire in Japanese at them, whereupon their mood changed and they said something back with some venom and went away. She told me I really didn't want to know what they had said or what she had said in return, but I pressed the matter and she said that one of them had said she had a BJ mouth, to which she replied, I certainly wouldn't have any trouble handling your 4 inches. I am an American who at one point was fluent in French. I was chatting with a French klezmer band. Yes, really, after a concert when one of them turned to the other said in French, hey, isn't she pretty? The other band member looked me over, shrugged and simply said meh. At a blackjack table in an Indian casino, 2 Mexican dudes were kind of drunk and talking business. Big business, of the Breaking Bad variety. I kept my head down and mouth shut and pretended I didn't hear a goddamn word. Many things overheard, but my favorite moment was early on when I first moved to Japan in 1994. Waiting on the train platform in a rural village when a mother and her young son come through the gate. Immediately the son grabs her mother's hand and tells her in Japanese that they have to be careful of me, that I'm a dangerous foreigner. He promised to protect her but he was hiding behind her. We had a long wait. Eventually he decided he could creep closer, still muttering under his breath about the foreigner. So I muttered back, I love Japanese children, they're delicious. He ran screaming. I did not feel bad about it. I lived in Japan for 2 years and went to the doctor to get a medical certificate for the flu. He stuck a swab up my nose, turned to his colleague and said he's got a big nose, doesn't he? I called him out and said, in Japanese, "Oh, my nose is big is it?" And he calmly turned back to me and said, "Sudisu ni yes, it is in this context. I scold doc talking about my sknoz. Zero fricks given Lomeo." My long-haired uncle was standing in line to pay for his groceries when he overheard 2 women speaking German behind him. Long-haired pig, he should get his hair cut. Without missing a beat, he turned around and asked, in German, "Do you have scissors?" I speak some Spanish, and in college, most of the staff working in the cafeteria was Hispanic. I was at the salad bar while 2 women were restocking it, and I heard them talking about my friend. "She's so pretty," one said. The other said, "Yes, great boobs too." Not gonna lie, they were right on the money. I was at McDonald's, so they could be forgiven for thinking I'm a tourist. "Man, hey, look, there's a foreigner. You like foreigners? Write your number on this." "Woman, looks, I like handsome foreigners." "Man, haha, his hair looks like a helmet, right?" Laughed my butt off. I've never heard someone talking about me, but I overheard an awkward conversation in a gas station between 2 Hispanic guys. It went like this. "Hey man, how are you doing?" "Oh, hey, yeah, I'm good. What are you doing?" "Oh, nothing really. Wanna go hang out?" "Oh, I can't. I've got plans." "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm going to my grandma's house." "Oh, okay. Hey, did you change your phone number? I keep trying to call you." "Oh, yeah, my phone has been acting up. Hey, I gotta go." It was painfully obvious that the second guy didn't want to be friends with the first guy, but guy 1 wasn't picking up any hints. I am a native Polish speaker living in Australia. It was Christmas Eve and I had not yet bought my girlfriend a present. I went to one of our malls which is open 24 hours on Christmas Eve and decided to do some shopping. The queues were ridiculous everywhere, but I decided to go to the Tiffany & Company store as I had little idea what to buy so I was in line to ask for assistance with an item. It was a pen that was on display. I was in line for a good 10 minutes when a yuppie, posh, expensively dressed, entitled Polish speaking couple are within earshot and I overheard this. "Honey, let's not wait in this queue and cut in front of this guy," referring to me, and slowly they inched closer and closer in front of me and sort of merged with the queue. I thought I'd let them wait with me for a bit before I said anything, especially because they were praising themselves on how clever they are for jumping the queue. After about 5-10 minutes when they were well and truly in front of me, I thought back to my old days, living in the grey communist flats blocks of 90s Poland and thought of how I would have reacted to this situation back then. I put on my Warsaw Ghetto attitude and said "Ejwajko, Kurwamak," translating roughly to "and what the frick do you suppose this is?" They looked at me with shock as I directed them to the back of the queue. I've always hated the wealthy Polish migrants. They have weak souls. Sat across from 2 German girls on a train. They said I was 7/10, maybe 8/10 if he smiled more. Looks like his mother died or something. Smells nice though. I told them my mother was fine. Not in real life, but I was once playing Stronghold 2 online, 2v2. Apparently pretty much everyone on there was German. Anyway, I'd greeted them in English, so I guess they assumed I only spoke that, and so even though there's no allies only chat, they felt comfortable talking about their plans with each other. They discussed their strategies in German. I understand German. I did well that game. Go out for beers with my half Iranian friend, who doesn't look Iranian weirdly, and we always end up going to different food places. A couple of times we left the place and he said those 2 guys behind the counter were Iranian, and they were complimenting the girl's boobs in front of us, and how they'd frick her if she didn't look like a horse. You have spotted this beautiful tasty sea of bacon. You can have as much as you want as long as you subscribe in the next 22 seconds. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.